And man, if we've ever been living in a time where we should be able to make that connection, it's the time we're living in right now, when everyone is so concerned about their physical health. Did you ever think you'd walk into a grocery store and everybody's got a mask on? Now, literally not everybody, but I mean lots of people. Did you ever think you would see a day when we all have to be 6 feet apart from each other? Where we do not shake a hand, we do not give a hug, we make sure that we're not going to infect each other. What is going on is that our country and the world is maximally concerned about its physical health, and yet God tells us in His Word that there's something more important than your physical life. It is your everlasting life. There's something more important than your body. It is your soul. And many of the same people who are so careful not to expose themselves to a virus that would disease their body regularly expose themselves to teaching that diseases their soul. When you understand the importance of your soul, then you'll see there is nothing more important in all the world than the doctrine that you and I receive. There is healthy doctrine, sound doctrine, and we should desire it. Not only is it true to say there are people who are exposing themselves to diseased doctrine, there are people who have access to healthy, sound doctrine, and they willingly starve themselves. They have no desire for it. They don't pursue it. So doesn't this speak to us? When we understand how sanctification happens, it's the outcome of a thinking process. You can only make choices that are as good as the information you have. Doesn't it say to us there's nothing more important in all the world than the right information? Jesus says, sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. Nothing more important than sound doctrine. But there's another implication of this. Doesn't that speak to us then about what's most important in a church? Most of the people joining us today, you're members of our church. I thank God for you. But there are some who are joining us today, no doubt, who are not members of our church. And maybe there are some even who don't go to church regularly, or maybe there are some who've been searching for a church. Can I tell you what is most important in a church? There's nothing more important in a church than its pulpit. There's nothing more important in a church than the message that goes forth from its teachers. Nothing more important than what is taught. I'm so grateful for a fellow elder and a fellow servant like Josh Philpott, who leads us in sound singing. We sing things that are true. But I want to tell you, there's something more important than our singing, and that's the preaching of the Word of God, because the preaching of the Word of God represents the truth that informs our singing. And I want you to understand that there are people in this world who love song because they love tunes. And they don't pay attention to what they're actually singing or saying. That's why someone like Josh is so important, because he's careful about what we're singing, to sing the truth to each other. Nothing more important in the life of a church than its doctrine. Which is why it's so grieving to me to see what the church often markets and to see what the consumer, as it were, from that vantage point, what the consumer's hungry for. We market all sorts of things. We market all sorts of programs and facilities. And isn't it interesting? This time, if it's done nothing else, it has had to teach us about what's most important in the life of a church. Because all the things that we might associate with public worship, they're taken away from us for a time. So what are we left with? Thank God we're left with what is enough. We're left with His Word. We're left with the truth. And therefore, having been informed rightly by the truth, love for each other, concern about each other, connection with each other, that we'll pursue even if we have to pursue it virtually. Because the Word of God has taught us how important that it is. But there are churches that have marketed everything but the Word of God. Sermonettes for Christianettes. Make sure we keep it brief. Don't take people too deep. Because apparently there's something more important than the message they get.